We appreciate everybody being here. I'm Bill Reinstein. I'm the CEO and founder of MedData Group. We provide audience identification data and digital targeting data of healthcare professionals. Our customers use the data for their targeting of their programmatic advertising, social, and increasingly now advanced TV, the different forms of advanced TV. It's also great to have here today Yuchen Feng. Yuchen, as introduced, is the head of healthcare now at LiveRamp. LiveRamp is a key partner of MedData Group. I'm going to just present a little bit of context, and then it'll be great to have a little bit of a discussion about our topic today. And so today we're going to talk about digital measurement for healthcare's digital advertising, and specifically where that intersects with really a growing theme of privacy and compliance. Certainly with CCPA not too far off on the horizon, and other regulations and what else might be emerging both at a state level and a federal level. It's important for us to look at what's important to us as pharma marketers to be able to measure. What do we want to be able to measure in the various forms of digital advertising that we're doing? And how do we do that in a privacy-safe basis? And again, especially with the shifting sands of privacy moving ahead. So as we just look at the use of digital advertising in healthcare, the numbers are very interesting. So we've had tremendous growth. Pharma has really embraced at this point programmatic, social, as I mentioned. We are on calls now with customers every week where people are asking more now about connected TV, about programmatic linear TV, et cetera. In terms of growth, some stats, we're probably all aware of them from eMarketer, 17% annual growth right now in pharma's use of various forms of digital marketing. $4 billion spent by pharma on digital marketing by 2020, which is now, I can't believe, only a few months away. But the interesting thing is that that still represents just 3% of all digital marketing dollars here in the United States. And so even with that growth, still represents a minority spend of all digital marketing dollars. The other interesting stat is relative to programmatic. I think it's 85% of all non-healthcare digital display is now bought programmatically, whereas under 25% of pharma pharma digital is bought programmatic. So some interesting discontinuities in the numbers there. Why? It works. And so both programmatic, social, but utilizing accurate NPI-level digital targeting is helping marketers outside of the professional endemic environments, which are important as well. But it works being able to target healthcare professionals, physicians, et cetera, in those blue jeans moments. Outside of that professional environment, to be able to engage them. I think the presentation early this morning, we have 8 seconds. So being able to get that engagement, that attention in those blue jeans moments on social, on digital display, et cetera, it works. But coming back to measurement then, the question is, how do we get at the core elements that represent successful measurement, the things we want to understand? How do we get at physician-level data across those digital channels? How do we do it at scale? So not projecting, not doing things from a statistical basis. How do we get to true measurement and attribution of physician and healthcare professionals' behavior across those channels? And how do we leverage that data to be able to optimize based on that unique individual, not based on cohorts of individuals, but based on that unique individual's interests and behavior? But most importantly then is, how do we do that in a privacy-safe way? How do we respect, again, I think it was Coleman this morning from Google, talked about our ability, the amounts of data that we have, but the responsibilities that we have in the stewardship of that data to be used in a privacy-safe way. What we're doing at MedData Group is looking at that with a little bit of a different viewpoint and a different architecture, saying that there is a way to be able to stay at measuring at scale for that unique physician with what we call a PSID, or a privacy safe ID, really a proxy for an NPI number. So being able to look at an individual physician's behavior, sites that they're on, engagement times, events, but being able to tie that back to offline behavior, being able to ultimately do script lift analysis and behavioral analysis based on those digital results. And so as we look at that intersection, if you will, I would love to start a discussion with Yuchen from LiveRamp. LiveRamp, as you know, really sits at the center of the digital ecosystem. Yuchen now heads up healthcare at LiveRamp. LiveRamp has been a partner of MedData Group for many years. I'd like to think we've done some interesting and innovative things together. You see things from a different viewpoint that I think is helpful to everyone in the audience, really, again, with LiveRamp sitting at the center of that digital ecosystem. So heading up healthcare now, I know healthcare is an increasing area of focus for LiveRamp. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit about your role and, in general, LiveRamp's viewpoint on the pharma and healthcare marketplace.
Absolutely, Bill. Well, I want to start by just thanking you for inviting LiveRamp and myself to really speak here with you. As you said, MedData Group and LiveRamp have been partnered together and have done some really productive things together. So I'm super excited to be here. So let me take a few moments to just give a little bit of background on LiveRamp. So we are a platform that connects data across physical and digital spaces in a safe and secure way, so that our clients can create applications, analytics, etc. on top of our platform for a number of different use cases. So where I myself have been at LiveRamp for 4 years now. I actually just celebrated my 4-year anniversary. And in that time, I've witnessed a pretty incredible growth in terms of our customer base, going from a few hundred to thousands. And in that time, one of the really interesting things that I noticed was that pharma and healthcare was growing a little bit slower than everyone else. And that problem really interested me because I saw an opportunity for growth. It's not that our pharma and healthcare clients were not interested in doing innovative things with us. It's just that there are special barriers that only exist in the pharma and healthcare space. And so around this time last year, I actually founded the healthcare team at LiveRamp to specifically focus on addressing the challenges, a lot of which are regulatory for pharma and healthcare clients. And so a year later, here we are. We've grown our healthcare and pharma footprint significantly, both in terms of partnerships and in terms of customers, and we're really excited to continue growing with our partners such as MedData.
So it's interesting when you talk about the role that LiveRamp plays, in the identity resolution space and then in the distribution of data and enabling programmatic, social, et cetera. The interesting thing that we were talking about is that measurement's important to all industries. But the needs in the B2B and in the B2C space of attribution relative to transactions typically is a very different use case than for pharma, where we're trying to make that connection ultimately between changes in clinical behavior back to individual identity and their journey on the web. But even at a more general level, from a privacy and compliance standpoint, how does LiveRamp across industries look at privacy and compliance relative to the kinds of digital marketing that we all do?
Bill, I'm really glad you asked this question because not just from a compliance perspective, we are actually champions of ethical data use. So from LiveRamp's perspective, our philosophy is that trust is really at the base of every relationship that we have as a business. And it's not
only important to be compliant with privacy regulations like HIPAA, like the GDPR, like CCPA in California, it's also important to develop a framework for ethical use of data and for protection of data on top of being just compliant. And so LiveRamp actually has extensive both technical and administrative processes to make sure that we are really understanding what purpose is personal data being used for, why is it being used, how is data flowing, so that we can really design systems that are privacy compliant from the start, so that we can prevent cases where there is unethical use of data or accidental leakage of data. So really the principles underlying how LiveRamp thinks about, privacy is, yes, privacy and compliance is very important, but there's also something on top of that, which is the idea of making sure that not only are we compliant with laws, but we are making sure that we are understanding how data is used, and that we work with our partner ecosystem to make sure that data is being used ethically.
So if we take that view toward compliance and ethical use of data and then tie it back again to sort of a core challenge that we face as healthcare marketers, what we're really trying to ultimately do is, in that reach and engagement of a physician, trying to then make that attribution of those digital marketing efforts back to a change in clinical behavior. We're trying to look at prescription writing behavior, et cetera, over a period of time, attributing that back and following that journey of that physician or healthcare professional. So some unique needs, and the challenge is then in remaining privacy compliant. How can you do that? How can we make that linkage between an individual where, in order to meet that objective of being able to measure not just clinical behavior, but other offline data sets, is there a way we can make that linkage while remaining privacy-centric or with a privacy-first approach?
I think this has been a challenge really for over a decade, right? And this has actually been a problem that LiveRamp has been focusing on since 2013. And we first launched a solution, a measurement solution suite, to address this problem back in 2015. And the stated goal of that solution suite was to enable our customers to truly understand the consumer journey, which can track a lot of data points, both in the physical and digital world. So there's, we actually have
on that, right?
We actually have an image here because a picture can be worth 1,000 words. But back in 2015, the focus was really on how empowering our clients to understand the consumer journey. Over time, that has really evolved to also enabling our healthcare clients to understand the healthcare professional journey and how they're interacting with brands. So you can't quite see it, but all the way on the left side is a icon for a healthcare professional. And this kind of line throughout the page really traces how a healthcare professional may interact with a brand or with a engagement with like a data provider or a platform. And so a healthcare professional can be exposed to a digital ad, they can be exposed to an ad on TV, they could visit a branded website, they could be engaged via social channels. Now, all of these touch points are like breadcrumbs that are spread out across the digital ecosystem. And it's actually really hard to be able to take those messy breadcrumbs and linearize them like this. So that was really the stated goal, tying back to what I was saying back in 2015, was LiveRamp really wanted to be able to help our customers connect these breadcrumbs. And fast forward 4 years later, we've been able to do that not only on the consumer level, but also on the healthcare professional level. And so our measurement vision is really enabling our customers in the pharma and healthcare space to really understand the patient journey and the healthcare provider journey so that engagement can happen at the right time, at the right place, with the right messaging.
And I think then what MedData Group is trying to do what we are doing in partnership with LiveRamp then is to try and take those breadcrumbs and turn them back into a loaf of bread. What you've been describing about what each of those breadcrumbs is, the challenge that we face and what we have been working to solve then is, can we assign an identity to each one of those breadcrumbs that allows us to then relate that digital identity back to offline data, but do it in a way that is not only privacy safe to the individual, but frankly meets the needs of everyone in this audience focused on brand safety. So can we actually look at that individual's journey, what sites they're on, time on site, did they engage, did they visit downstreambrand.com, but then still be able to take that actual identity. And so what we're doing in partnership with LiveRamp is being able to leverage your identity graph to then make that linkage back and be able to do that form of measurement, to be able to do the analytics tying together those offline data sets with the online data sets from that digital advertising. But to do it in a way that respects the personal privacy as well as the kinds of privacy and compliance that you're speaking of.
That's exactly right, Bill. I'd actually love to hear from you a little bit more about the specific solution that we've put together to address this exact problem, right? So in the healthcare industry, we hear a lot about, physician-level data.
Right.
And I would just love to hear you go into a little bit more detail about how we can understand at a physician level whether a script lift, how do we do like script lift measurement in a scalable and accurate way?
Right, so I think that the word PLD, or physician level data, right, we're saying that it can have multiple meanings. That you can have physician level data without knowing the PII that's attached to that NPI number. Mm-hmm. And so what we've been able to architect with LiveRamp is that ability to assign a unique ID, a privacy safe ID, in replacement of an NPI number, so that we can then look at that ID. I now no longer know that it's Yuchen, but I can look at the sites that you're on. Again, those basic digital metrics as well as downstream metrics, but that with the benefit of that identity linkage, be able to then also take script level data, for instance, and be able to also convert that to that same unique privacy safe ID and be able in that way to link them back together, to form that loaf of bread.
Exactly.
And be able to do that level of analysis. So that's really at the core of it.
Yeah, and at a concrete level, just to help everyone here visualize a little bit, what is actually happening is, you might start out with Bill Reinstein, and then after that data goes through LiveRamp, transformation is applied, and what comes out is ABC123, right? And then analyses are then performed using ABC123 instead of Bill Reinstein. And that's how, at a very high level, we are enabling this physician-level analysis, but in a privacy-centric and ethical way.
Right. So I think the word privacy and then compliance comes back to the notion of not just self-regulatory areas that we've been looking at from DAA, from IAB, from NAI for years now. It's interesting because I think it was just like 4 or 5 months ago at Digital Pharma West, there was one session where we talked about CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, which comes into effect in just 4 months. And there is still a tremendous amount of uncertainty and ambiguity around the law, but the law is one step. It's not the end. We've got other states that ultimately will become a round of federal, but it's a framework that we can work within, and that notion of privacy can work within those needs of being able to do measurement. But I'm curious, just from a LiveRamp perspective, again, sitting at the center of that digital ecosystem, how are you viewing CCPA and other legislation and adapting for that new area that we're all going to have to face?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question because LiveRamp actually views CCPA and the GDPR in Europe and even legislation like HIPAA, HITECH, et cetera, as like fundamentally good things. And we also view it as an opportunity because it's a problem to be solved, quite frankly. And for CCPA specifically, the California Consumer Privacy Act, it's actually been quite challenging for the entire industry because it's quite unclear. You know, like Bill said, we're about 4 months away from January 1st, 2020, when the law first goes into effect. And there's still guidances and clarifications being issued by the Attorney General. And so where LiveRamp really sees the opportunity is that, well, we have a global data privacy and data ethics team that is thinking not only about CCPA and GDPR and HIPAA, it's thinking about like the whole breadth of possible consumer privacy legislation, including the ones that don't necessarily exist yet, as Bill has alluded to. And we're not only in the business of making sure that all of our business operations are compliant, but we're actually actively looking at ways to provide solutions for the entire for our entire ecosystem. So an example of that is earlier this year, we actually made an acquisition of a European-based company called Factor, who operates a consent management platform, because the common theme among a lot of these privacy regulations is the idea of being able to opt out of having your data being used and sold. And so we figured that, that this is going to continue, this theme will continue throughout any future legislation. And so we're making actually active and significant investments to A, help ourselves, and of course, B, provide solutions into the market, like I said, to be able to successfully manage a highly regulated space.
It's interesting. So we're starting to talk to you folks as well about Factor and how that can be leveraged by third-party data providers like MedData Group. I think that there's probably 2 words that fit in there, which is transparency and choice. And I think that from a I can only speak from a data provider perspective, but there's the LiveRamp perspective, there's a brand perspective. From a data provider perspective, similarly, it's about choice, making sure that the folks that we are advertising to and targeting our messaging to understand that they can opt out. So we've worked with CAN-SPAM for 14 years now. And everybody understands the concept of opting out of an email. But it's interesting now that we're starting to have to deal with that notion that there need to be multiple mechanisms in place that people can say, I want to opt out of all digital targeting, email and other. And I think, though, if we treat their data and if we work with our advertising in an ethical and privacy-safe or privacy-centric way, I think we're fine with that. There is another element, even from a data provider perspective, of being able to, in that transparency, be able to tell the individual who data's been shared with.
Yep.
And so I think as long as we understand, which I agree is the interesting thing about CCP, there were like 3 amendments that were passed on Sunday this week in the California legislature. It's about trying to understand and interpret it. I want to leave time for questions, but one of the areas, just taking a little bit of a left-hand turn, we've been meeting with many of the folks here, agencies, et cetera. There's a tremendous amount of interest now in advanced TV, encompassing a few different forms, connected TV, programmatic linear. From a pharma perspective, where pharma is very comfortable with video and TV, it represents great opportunity, and not only on the patient side, but also with healthcare professionals. I'm just interested from a LiveRamp perspective, since you enable a lot of those connections in advanced TV, what your thoughts are on how pharma marketers can leverage really a new mechanism and a new form of media.
Yeah, that's a great question. So advanced TV at LiveRamp is also one of our hottest growth areas. So similar to MedData Group, we're hearing a ton of inbound from our customers across industries, including in the pharma industry, of interest in advanced TV. So this is data-driven linear, which is like your typical channels like ABC, NBC. There's connected TV, which includes your your Samsung smart TVs of the world. There's over the top. So there's TV. There's a lot of acronyms here. So in TV land, there's also over the top, which is your Roku devices of the world. But more and more, I guess I'm not going to go through the whole list of alphabet soup. But more and more, the trend is that a lot of traditional TV channels are starting to become more one-to-one, more targetable, and at a household level, but still a lot more one-to-one than it was in the past. And with platforms like connected TV platforms like Roku, it is potentially targetable one-to-one. And so as this trend occurs throughout the TV industry, LiveRamp has been getting behind this trend as well. And we actually see tremendous potential for the pharmaceutical industry and for data providers like Data Group to heavily invest in TV over the next coming years. And especially for pharma companies who are used to running a lot of TV, who are used to running a lot of TV ads, we think being able to take those ads, make them more targeted, and more importantly, make them more measurable, that will create tremendous value in the space.
And it comes back to that same thing, that we need to be able to measure that.
Exactly.
And creating that privacy-safe architecture allows us to do that independent of the channel. It could be programmatic, or it could be data-driven programmatic linear. I want to leave, we just have a couple of minutes. I want to leave time for some questions if there are.
So it sounds like you guys are getting de-identified data, and as a pharma marketer, oftentimes we're coming with SP data, claims data from our side, and maybe it's, and I'm not clear on this, so definitely help me out, but are we saying, hey, if we're coming with that data, you've got de-identified data, how are you tying that together without knowing who it is from our list, let's say, that we're talking about?
Right. Do we have a whiteboard? No, in short, part of that process that we've built is the ability to take anything with an NPI number. So to take your data, whether it is script level data, CRM level data, and be able to convert that PII, that NPI number, to our form of it, a privacy safe ID, and then through the process we've built with LiveRamp, be able to also take those digital identifiers, cookies, mobile ad IDs, et cetera, and be able to join the two together. The benefit of that is we can then give that data. We're not an analytics company. We can give that data back and allow the pharma marketers to be able to do their own analytics, but in a closed loop environment.
Yeah, a common use case that LiveRamp sees is the combination of first-party data, which as a pharma marketer, you may not have a huge amount of, but we do see customers that do have it, and combining it with third-party from data providers like Data Group, and using that to really bring it in-house into a data lake so that you can have full control. We see that use case pretty commonly, the combination of first and third-party data to use for modeling, targeting, analytics.
Hi, Chris Nooner from PulsePoint, and maybe more of a question for LiveRamp. Can you land the plane a little bit now that you've got that identifier, that NPI? How are you able to translate that into a connected television device or other?
That's a great question. So that's more of a question about how does the LiveRamp secret sauce work? And at the center of LiveRamp is this really, you can think of it as a massive Excel table. Now, I'm simplifying a lot here because it's actually locked down in our Google Cloud servers. There's severe access controls. There's no actual Excel table that exists. But for the purpose of visualization here, you can visualize a massive Excel table that literally has identifiers sitting next to each other. And this Excel table is extremely, extremely wide. So any partner in our ecosystem can come to us with like their own identifier. So, med data group ID associated with a particular NPI number, right? And then we will add that as a column in our massive Excel table. And then similarly, a TV partner in our ecosystem will be another column in that table. So we literally can just walk from column A to column B to connect identifier A to identifier B. Again, massive simplification here. There's a lot more happening actually behind the scenes, but conceptually, that is what it means to perform identity resolution, which is the ability to crosswalk from one identifier universe to another identifier universe, which enables connection of silo data in a privacy compliant way.
One last question here. So you've talked a lot about marketing related data. But do you all do any work, or have you all done any work for companies where they want to layer on patient data with other sources of data and then provide that anonymized data to companies who can then run deep analytics on it, run artificial intelligence or machine learning based algorithms on it to derive insights from that data?
That's phase 3. We're on phase 1. The honest answer, no, not yet. I think there are whole layers of complexity to what you're describing. That's certainly the promised land. We're not quite there yet. We're building the foundation to ultimately enable that kind of richer analytics, but I think we have a little way to go.
On the LiveRamp side, we actually are in pilot phases with a couple of clients who are kind of doing what you're describing. So on the healthcare side of the equation, we are connecting and de-identifying social determinants of health as well as claims and labs data in order to facilitate a whole patient view in a de-identified way. Early stage, but find me afterwards if you're interested in discussing more. And then, similarly in the pharma space, replace social determinants of health with real-world evidence, and we are absolutely looking at use cases in those domains.
Thank you so much, Bill and Yuchen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation.